Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest bite-sized learning from the UN Global Compact Network Australia. So these are a series of conversations we're having with leading experts unpacking key human rights issues for Australian businesses. My name is Caskey, and I look after the human rights programming at the UN Global Compact Network in Australia. And we're currently in Melbourne for the 2023 Australian Dialogue on Business and Human Rights. And it is my absolute privilege today to be joined by Lene Wendland, Chief of Business and Human Rights at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. Thank you so much for making the time, Lene. Now, Lena's CV is extraordinarily long, so I'm not going to get through all of it, but I will just note a couple of things. So in addition to the role at the Office of the High Commissioner, Lene directs the UN Human Rights Corporate Accountability and Remedy Project, which works to drive corporate accountability and access to remedy. She also directs the BTEC project, which convenes stakeholders all over the world to apply the UN guiding principles in the context of emerging technologies. And Lene also has a close history of working with the UN Global Compact, including serving on its expert advisory group hosted by our UN Global Compact office in New York, as well as the co-author of Human Rights Translated, a Business Reference Guide, which is still very much the Bible for applying business and human rights standards across the world. So thank you very much for being here. Now, today we're going to be talking about movement on business and human rights at the international level. So Lene, just to start us off, can you give us an overview of progress to date and just even some trends that you're seeing at that level?
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I think one of the strongest trends currently is the move towards mandatory measures, particularly around human rights due diligence. Earlier, regulatory trends focused, like here in Australia, on reporting requirements, for example, around specific human rights issues like modern slavery. But the trend now, particularly coming out of Europe, but also we're seeing some movement in Latin America and in some other parts of the world, to consider having regulation that would mandate companies to do human rights and environmental due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier trends in the business and human rights space was around national action plans,
Mm-hmm.
which was the national action plans on business and human rights, which started in a number of European countries. Now a number of Asian countries are developing national action plans to sort of have a strategic framework for how they want to ensure that that human rights are respected in the context of business activities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I suppose one of the things I really wanted to touch on, and you addressed this in your keynote yesterday, which was fantastic, was the notion of remedy. And we know that of the protect, respect, remedy framework, the access to an effective remedy is sort of one of the most difficult aspects, I think, for companies to get right. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Corporate Accountability Project and how that the project helps businesses provide access to an effective remedy?
Yeah, indeed. We sometimes refer to the third pillar of the guiding principles as the forgotten pillar, because following 2011, when the guiding principles were endorsed by the UN Human Rights Council and a number of stakeholders, including from business,
Mm-hmm.
there was a flurry of activities around Pillar 1, so the role of states, so the mentioned national action plans. Companies were engaging in trying to make sense of what was this human rights due diligence going to look like, but neither of those efforts necessarily covered access to an effective remedy, which is the third and equal pillar of the guiding principles.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that the whole proposition of the guiding principles is predicated on movement across all the three pillars, we at the United Nations Human Rights Office, we launched the Accountability and Remedy Project in order to generate more activity, more understanding, and better guidance on how to actually implement the different types of remedy propositions that are included in Pillar 3.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically for business, we spent what we call the third phase, the third phase of the Accountability and Remedy Project, focused on non-state-based grievance mechanisms. So that would typically mean company-led grievance mechanisms or grievance mechanisms that are associated with a multi-stakeholder initiative, also involving companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we have quite extensive guidance available on the portal that is directed specifically at those inside or outside companies that are designing or running grievance mechanisms that involve companies. And so I really invite any viewer who's interested in the subject to to consult the guidance that we have produced, that was developed very much in consultation with business and other stakeholders, but very much practitioners in business, in order to ensure that the guidance reflects some of the practical realities and helps overcome some of the actual challenges in moving ahead of this space.
And it's something our participants have asked us too. When you're going through the process, if you've got a grievance mechanism set up, you've had relevant notifications, and you suspect there may be a particular adverse human rights impact, just understanding who to talk to, how you can actually operationalize an effective remedy in the context of your company. One of the other aspects that I wanted to touch on from your keynote yesterday was just the fast pace of technological change has posed all sorts of risks and impacts for human rights. Of course, with risks to democracy, with disinformation campaigns and the like. It's a very fast moving space. And now, of course, with advances in AI and the like, can you just give me a sense of how companies may be able to get involved with the big tech project to help with some of those impacts?
Yeah. No, thank you for that. So just the BTEC project that we launched in 2019, and BTEC is really short for Business and Human Rights and Technology, for those for whom it's not entirely obvious, but that really is focused on applying the UN Guiding Principles, the lens of the UN Guiding Principles to the world of digital technologies. The human rights impacts of technologies, I think, are fairly well known to any sort of casual reader of news. You don't need to be a human rights expert to know about breaches of privacy, hate speech, democracy, attacks on elections, or corruption in electoral processes, just to mention a few. And I should add that, of course, there is a full recognition also of all the positive impacts and a potential for human rights, positive potential for human rights that comes with digital technologies. But applying the lens of the guiding principles means focusing on how best to prevent and mitigate the risks without prejudicing the conversation about the potential positive impacts on technology.
And of course, that is a plug for the theme of our dialogue this year, which is bringing home the UN Guiding Principles on business and human rights. And we are challenging companies to look at those adverse human rights impacts first. Final question. Now, of course, this year is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Can you tell me a little bit about the messaging from the UN Human Rights Office on the campaign? So is there anything being done in the office level?
Yeah, very much so. So the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, he is leading a year-long campaign, global campaign, to really call for the reaffirmation of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and using those entrenched values and rights as the framework for the world looking forward, and as the sort of roadmap to navigate some of the really serious geopolitical and climate and other multiple crises that the world is facing. So more specifically, in order for it to generate the celebration, to generate concrete actions, he's calling on all stakeholders, so states, civil society, and companies, to make pledges on how what they would like to do in order to move forward and to take action on the rights embedded in the Universal Declaration. So on the OHCHR website, there is a link to the Human Rights 75 campaign, and there is a particular link with guidance for business who are interested in knowing more of the campaign and how they may make pledges, either individually as companies or with peers, through their business organizations, or indeed with other stakeholders. So we really do invite all of you, to all companies and others, to join in the celebration, to really ensure that as we're looking forward, and as a world, we only have this planet, at least for now, to make these fundamental values that have stood the test of time over 75 years inform how we respond to the multiple crises that we are faced with.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lena. And we're going to include all of the information on some of the things that we discussed in the conversation below, including a link to the OACHR website with some of these extra pieces. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I have a million nerdy questions that I'd love to pick your brain on, but thank you so much for making the time to chat today. And of course, thank you so much for making the trip to Melbourne. I know it's a reasonably long trip, so we're very, very much appreciative.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for watching. If you would like to learn more about the UN Global Compact, of course, you can visit us at unglobalcompact.org.au. Be sure to check out the website for further resources and some of our discussion points. Otherwise, we will see you again in the next one. Thank you again, Lene.